At the wedding, my daughter replaced me with her rich stepfather for the father-daughter dance, laughing, "You'll just trip under my feet." I silently walked away, but a few hours later I gave a speech, after which the guests started whistling, and my daughter ran out of the hall crying. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. The federal agents were already in my office when I got back from Sedona. I noticed the black SUVs first, 3 of them parked like they owned the place on East Camelback Road. Then I saw the yellow tape across my door. Barnes Tax Consulting, in gold letters. 35 years of building trust with every client, now looking like a crime scene from some bad TV show. Frank Barnes, the agent who stepped forward, had that particular blend of professional courtesy and absolute certainty that makes your stomach drop. "I'm Special Agent Morrison, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We need you to come with us." My hands were shaking when they showed me the documents. $320,000. Gone. My client's money vanished through a maze of fraudulent tax returns I'd supposedly filed. The paperwork looked perfect. My signature, my client codes, even my goddamn coffee stain on one of the forms from last December. "Mr. Barnes, this account was opened 4 months ago." Agent Morrison slid a bank statement across the interrogation table. "The routing shows systematic transfers from your client's refunds. Small amounts, spread out. Very clever." I stared at the account number. I'd never seen it before in my life. "Someone set me up," I said. My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. "I don't know who, but someone with access to your office, your computer systems, your client files?" Morrison's eyebrow went up. "Mr. Barnes, who else has that kind of access?" That's when I realized how perfectly I'd been framed. My office manager retired 6 months ago. I'd been running everything myself, except when Kiara brought little Sammy by after school. Except when Brian, my son-in-law, my daughter's husband, stopped by to check on the old man while I grabbed lunch. Brian, who always seemed so interested in how my business worked. Brian, who'd asked to use my computer just to check real estate listings a dozen times. Brian, who had a key to the office because family should be able to help out. The trial lasted 3 days. My public defender was fresh out of law school and completely outmatched. The prosecution had everything: forged signatures that somehow looked exactly like mine, timestamps showing I was in the office when the transfers happened, even my fingerprints on the fake account application. I sat there watching my life dismantle piece by piece, and the whole time I kept thinking, who benefits from this? Then Brian took the stand. "Mr. Kelly, you're married to the defendant's daughter, correct?" "Yes, sir." Brian looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat like this was painful for him. Oscar-worthy performance, really. "Kiara and I have been married for 9 years. Frank was like a father to me." "In the past year, did you notice anything unusual about Mr. Barnes's behavior?" Brian hesitated. Perfect timing, perfect delivery. I didn't want to say anything. He's family. But yes, I saw some things that concerned me. My lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Brian continued, his voice heavy with false regret. He'd been making mistakes, forgetting things. I saw him working late, doing calculations over and over. Once I came by and found him moving money between accounts. He said it was for tax efficiency, but it seemed odd. I thought maybe he was just getting old, losing his edge. I wanted to stand up and call him a liar. I wanted to scream that he'd been in my office alone a dozen times, that he'd had every opportunity to set this up. But my lawyer grabbed my arm, whispered urgently about making things worse. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 2 years federal prison, restitution of $320,000 I didn't have, and the permanent destruction of my reputation. They took me to the county jail to await transfer. Gray walls, metal bed, the smell of industrial cleaner trying to mask something worse. I sat there in my orange jumpsuit, 67 years old, wondering how I'd survive prison. The letter arrived on day 3. The guard slid it through the slot with my breakfast tray, white envelope, careful handwriting. No return address, but I recognized Brian's neat printing immediately. "Frank, I know this is hard. I want you to know that Kiara and I will take care of everything while you're gone. The house on Desert Willow Drive, we'll make sure it's maintained. Keep the property taxes paid, all of it. Don't worry about Sammy either. We'll raise him right. Sorry it came to this, but honestly, your time was up anyway. Thanks for the house. We'll take good care of it. Brian, I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. Thanks for the house. Not your house. Not, we'll watch over it. Thanks for the house. Like it was already his. Like this whole thing had been about getting me out of the way so he could take what was mine. I sat on that metal bed, holding that letter, and something cold settled into my chest. Not rage. Rage is hot. Impulsive. Stupid. This was something else. This was the feeling you get when you're 67 years old and realize you've been played by someone you trusted, someone you welcomed into your family. I thought about the chess games I used to play at the Phoenix Chess Society. Long, complicated matches where you sacrifice pieces to gain position, where you think 15 moves ahead, where patience matters more than passion. Brian thought he'd won. He'd executed his plan perfectly. Framed the old man, take his house, his reputation, his freedom. Clean sweep. But Brian had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed that because I was kind, I was weak. He'd assumed that because I'd spent 35 years helping people with their taxes, I didn't understand how to hurt someone. He'd given me 2 years to think, 2 years to plan, 2 years to stop being the victim and become something else. I folded the letter carefully and slid it under my mattress. Then I lay back on the bed and started thinking. Not about innocence or justice or any of that naive nonsense. I started thinking about what a tax consultant knows, about money trails, about legal loopholes, about the thousands of ways the system can be used against someone if you know where to push. Brian had taught me an important lesson. Nice guys finish last. Time to stop being nice. Florence Correctional Facility squatted in the Arizona desert like a concrete tumor. They processed me in on a Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. Fingerprints, medical exam, the cheerful orientation where they explained the rules for survival. Don't take anything that isn't yours. Don't look anyone in the eye too long. Keep your head down. I was assigned to a cell with a 23-year-old kid named Marcus, who'd been caught selling stolen electronics. He took one look at me, gray hair, reading glasses, soft hands from 35 years of pushing paper, and decided I was harmless. Tax guy, huh? Marcus said on the first night. That's almost funny. Like you hurt people with math or something. Something like that, I said. The first month was survival mode, learning the routines, figuring out which guards to avoid, which inmates ran what rackets. I kept quiet, did my work in the prison laundry, stayed invisible. But at night, lying on that thin mattress with Marcus snoring above me, I thought about Brian's letter. Thanks for the house. In my old life, I would have been devastated, betrayed, broken. But something had shifted. Maybe it was the orange jumpsuit, or the way everyone assumed I was just another white-collar criminal who'd gotten greedy. Maybe it was knowing that my daughter believed Brian over me, that my grandson would grow up thinking his grandfather was a thief, or maybe it was simpler. I had nothing left to lose. I remembered when Brian first started dating Kiara. She'd brought him to Sunday dinner at the house, my house, the one on Desert Willow Drive that I'd bought 28 years ago when my wife was still alive. Brian had been charming, funny, attentive, 43 years old, successful real estate agent, great with Sammy, even though the kid was only 3 then. Dad, he makes me feel safe, Kiara had said after that first dinner, helping me with dishes while Brian played with Sammy in the living room. After Mom died, I didn't think I'd find someone who understood. I'd been happy for her. My daughter deserved happiness. Brian seemed perfect. I remembered the day they moved into my house. It was supposed to be temporary, just 6 months while they saved for a down payment. Brian had stood in the driveway, shaking my hand. You're doing us a huge favor, Frank. We won't forget this. That was 5 years ago. The visitation request came in May 2023, 1 month into my sentence. Brian Kelly and Kiara Barnes Kelly listed on the form. I stared at it for a long time in my cell. Marcus was at lunch, so I had the space to myself. I could picture exactly how it would go. Brian would sit across from me in the visiting room, wearing his concerned face. Kiara would cry. They'd talk about how hard this was for everyone, how they were supporting me through this difficult time. Brian would ask if I needed anything, make a show of caring, and the whole time he'd be checking, watching my face, listening to my words, trying to figure out if I suspected the truth. I picked up the form and wrote one word across it: declined. The guard who collected it looked surprised. You sure? It's your daughter, man. I'm sure. He came back the next month, and the month after that. Every 30 days, like clockwork, Brian Kelly requested visitation, sometimes with Kiara, sometimes alone. I declined every single time. I never wrote a letter explaining why, never sent a message, just declined in black ink on white paper, over and over. I wanted him to wonder. I wanted him to lie awake at night, trying to figure out what I was thinking. Most of all, I wanted him to feel safe, to believe that I was just a broken old man who couldn't face his family. Let him think he'd won. Let him get comfortable. The prison library became my second home. It was small, maybe 200 books, most of them falling apart, but they had a legal section. Inmates doing appeals had donated their research materials over the years. I started with the basics: Arizona trust law, estate planning, tax codes I'd memorized decades ago but needed to review. I remembered something one of my old professors at ASU had said, back when I was getting my accounting degree in 1978. The tax code is a weapon. Most people just don't know how to aim it. In week 6, I met Officer Raymond Torres during my shift in the laundry. He was supervising, making sure we didn't steal the industrial-sized detergent bottles for some prison hooch operation. I recognized him immediately. I'd done his taxes for 12 years, helped him claim a home office deduction that saved him $4,000 on his mortgage refinance. Mr. Barnes? He looked genuinely shocked. What the hell are you doing here? Bad luck, I said quietly, and a good frame job. Torres glanced around, then moved closer. Those tax returns they showed at your trial, that wasn't your work. I know your work. You're meticulous. Those forms were sloppy. Yeah, I said. I noticed that too. He studied my face for a long moment. You need anything? Actually, I said carefully, I need to send a letter. Not through regular prison mail. Can you help? Torres didn't ask questions. The next day, he brought me a stamped envelope and a piece of paper. I wrote carefully, Mr. Bernard Fisher, of Fisher Private Investigations. I need your help proving I was framed. I can't pay you now, but I have assets you can access once I'm cleared. Please visit. Frank Barnes, Florence Correctional Facility. I'd found Bernard's name in a legal journal in the library. He specialized in financial crimes investigation. I just had to hope he was curious enough to come. 3 weeks later, I got word that I had a visitor. Not Brian this time, a private investigator with clearance. Bernard Fisher was 54, built like someone who'd spent too many years sitting in cars on stakeouts. He sat across from me in the visiting room and opened a yellow notepad. Mr. Barnes, I got your letter. Tell me why I should take a case from an inmate with no money and a conviction for embezzlement. Because I was set up, I said, and because the person who did it made one mistake. He got greedy. Brian Kelly, my son-in-law. Check his bank records from February 2023. He paid off $180,000 in debt right before my client's money disappeared. Check his business partner, Sharon Whitmore. She got a sudden $45,000 consulting fee at the same time. Bernard wrote this down. That's circumstantial. It's a start, I said. I spent 35 years following money trails. I know how this works. Brian had access to my office, my computer, my client files. He had motive, gambling debts probably knowing his type, and he had me perfectly positioned to take the fall. Old guy, working alone, no witnesses. What do you want me to do? Find the proof, document everything. I have 2 years to build a case. I leaned forward. And Bernard, I'm not just trying to prove my innocence. I'm going to destroy him, legally, completely. I want you to find every crime he committed, every lie he told, every dollar he hid. Bernard studied me. That's not about justice, that's revenge. Call it what you want, I said. Are you in? He was. Brian's next visitation request came 2 days later. I declined it again, but this time I smiled when I wrote the word. Because now I wasn't just refusing to see him. I was refusing to let him know what was coming. In my cell that night, I thought about chess again, about how the best players sacrifice material to gain position, about how sometimes you have to lose everything before you can win. Brian had taken 2 years of my life, my reputation, my business, my relationship with my daughter. He'd bet everything on me being too broken, too old, too weak to fight back. He'd made a terrible miscalculation. I pulled out the notebook I'd started keeping, hidden under my mattress next to Brian's letter. Page 1 had a timeline. Page 2 had names. Page 3 had a single sentence at the top. Justice, like chess, requires patience, strategy, and the ability to see several moves ahead. I was playing a long game now, and Brian had no idea the clock had already started. 8 months in prison teaches you things they don't cover in accounting school. December 2023 rolled around with the same gray walls, the same terrible food, the same morning count where we all stood like cattle waiting to be numbered. But something had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was hunting. Bernard Fisher's reports arrived every 2 weeks, smuggled in through Officer Torres, along with my regular mail. The prison censors saw tax documents and legal papers, boring stuff from an old man trying to appeal his case. They never looked closely enough to see what I was really reading. Subject, Brian Kelly made a cash deposit of $180,000 on February 14, 2023. Bernard's first report stated. Bank records show this as personal funds. Kelly paid off outstanding debts to 3 different creditors within 48 hours. Timeline matches the disappearance of funds from your client's accounts. I sat on my bunk reading this, and Marcus looked over from his upper rack. Good news, old man. Educational material, I said. I'm learning how criminals think. The irony wasn't lost on me. Bernard's surveillance logs painted an interesting picture. Brian maintained his routine like clockwork. Office from 9 to 6. Lunch at expensive restaurants he couldn't actually afford. Evening drinks with colleagues. He lived large in my house, the house he thought would eventually be his. Pool parties in the summer. Holiday decorations at Christmas. Playing happy family with my grandson in my backyard. But Bernard noticed the cracks. The stressed phone calls in the parking lot. The meetings with a woman named Sharon Whitmore that lasted longer than professional courtesy required. The way Brian checked over his shoulder when he thought no one was watching. Subject appears nervous, Bernard wrote in his November report. Increased alcohol consumption observed. Subject has visited Florence Correctional Facility monthly to request visitation with you. Each time declined. This appears to frustrate him. That made me smile. Good. Let him wonder. January 2024 brought snow to the desert. Rare, but it happened. I watched it fall through the narrow window in the library while pretending to read Arizona revised statutes. In reality, I was memorizing Bernard's latest findings. Sharon Whitmore, real estate colleague at Brian's agency, 42 years old, divorced, expensive tastes. She'd received a $45,000 consulting fee from a shell company in February 2023. The same shell company that had briefly held some of my stolen client funds before they vanished into Brian's accounts. She was his accomplice. Had to be. You don't get that kind of money that close to a major embezzlement without being involved. Bernard had interviewed 3 of Sharon's former colleagues. One mentioned she'd been weirdly secretive about a special project last winter. Another said she'd suddenly taken a trip to Cabo in March 2023, right after my arrest, and posted photos of herself drinking expensive champagne. Stupid. Criminals always get stupid with money. They can't help themselves. The next visitation request came in February 2024. Brian again? No Kiara this time. Just him, solo, making his monthly pilgrimage to check on me. I imagined him in the waiting room, signing in, preparing his concerned face. I wrote declined with more force than necessary. The pen almost tore through the paper. Officer Torres collected the form and shook his head. He's been coming every month for almost a year, Mr. Barnes. Your daughter, too, sometimes. Maybe you should... No, I said. He needs to keep wondering why I won't see him. It's part of the plan. Torres didn't ask what plan. He'd learned not to. In my cell at night, I kept my notebooks hidden inside legal textbooks. Marcus never looked at them. He thought I was just another old guy trying to appeal his case. On page 14, I'd created a timeline. February 14th, 2023. Brian deposits $180,000 cash. February 15th, 17th, 2023. Brian pays off debts March 3rd, 2023. My clients report missing refunds. March 8th, 2023. FBI arrests me. March 9th, 2023. Sharon Whitmore deposits $45,000. The pattern was so obvious it hurt. How had the FBI missed this? Or maybe they hadn't missed it. Maybe they'd just gotten lazy once they had their tax consultant in handcuffs. Clean conviction, case closed, move on to the next one. But I wasn't lazy, and I had nothing but time. April 2024 marked 1 year since I'd entered Florence Correctional Facility. The prison threw no parties. Marcus got released, hugged me goodbye, and promised to stay clean this time. I got a new cellmate, a kid named Deshaun who'd violated parole on a drug charge. "What you in for, old-timer?" he asked on his first night. "Embezzlement I didn't commit," I said. He laughed. "Yeah, everyone in here's innocent." "Most people are lying," I agreed. "I'm not." Bernard's April report was different, thicker. He'd been doing what investigators call deep background work, checking Brian's full financial history, not just the obvious timeline around my arrest. Brian Kelly had a gambling problem, not just casual poker with buddies, serious gambling. Bernard found credit card receipts from Las Vegas trips, online betting accounts under shell email addresses, debts to 3 different bookies that totaled $180,000 by January 2023. Exactly $180,000. Brian had been desperate, drowning in debt. And then suddenly, miraculously, in February 2023, he wasn't. All paid off. Clean slate. And all it cost him was framing his father-in-law and stealing from innocent clients. I read that report 3 times. Then I wrote Bernard a short note. "Keep digging. I want everything. Bank accounts, tax returns, business dealings, parking tickets, everything. When we move against him, I want it to be total." Bernard's response came 2 weeks later. "Understood. Also, Kelly filed a visitation request for May, his 12th attempt. Should I arrange counter-surveillance?" I wrote back, "No. Let him come. Let him keep coming. I want a record of every single visit he tried to make. Shows he knew something was wrong. Couldn't leave it alone." May, June, July 2024. The visits kept coming. The declines kept going back. Each one was a little victory. A reminder that I was controlling this game now, not him. Bernard found Sharon Whitmore's weak point in August. Taxes. She'd reported that $45,000 payment as consulting income, but had used most of it for personal expenses that couldn't possibly be business-related. The Cabo vacation, a new car, designer handbags, all documented in her social media posts, tagged and dated like evidence she'd gift-wrapped for us. "Whitmore is our leverage point," Bernard wrote. "If this goes to court, she'll flip on Kelly to save herself. Guaranteed." I filed that information away carefully. Not yet. Not until all the pieces were in position. September brought cooler nights and the realization that I'd been locked up for 17 months. 17 months of gray walls and bad food and the same routines. But I wasn't the same man who'd entered these gates. That man had been soft, trusting, naive enough to think good work and honest living meant something. This new version of me understood better. Life wasn't fair. Justice wasn't guaranteed. And sometimes the only way to win was to play the long game better than your opponent. Brian's October visit request arrived with a note. "Please, Frank, we need to talk. It's about Sammy," using my grandson as bait. Classy. I declined it faster than usual. Bernard's October report included photographs. Brian looking stressed outside his office. Sharon Whitmore having lunch with him, both looking serious. Brian checking his phone constantly, the universal sign of someone waiting for bad news. They knew something was coming. They could feel it. They just didn't know what, and that's exactly how I wanted it. December 2024 arrived cold and clear, 4 months until release. Time to stop gathering information and start building weapons. My public defender had been useless during the trial, but Bernard had found me someone better. Michael Cordova, a criminal defense attorney who actually believed in my innocence now that he'd seen the evidence. Cordova visited me on December 3rd, bringing a briefcase full of documents and a plan. "Mr. Barnes, the case for your appeal is strong," Cordova said in the visiting room. "Fisher's investigation shows clear evidence of financial irregularities in Kelly's accounts. Timeline matches perfectly. We can file for post-conviction relief based on newly discovered evidence. That's step one, I said. What about step two? Cordova smiled slightly. You want to go after Kelly directly? I want to destroy him, I corrected. Legally. Completely. I want him to lose everything the way I lost everything. That requires a different kind of lawyer, Cordova said. Someone who specializes in trusts and estates. I know someone. That's how Catherine Ramos entered my life. 49 years old, sharp as broken glass, with a reputation for winning inheritance disputes that other lawyers called impossible. She visited me 1 week after Cordova, and I knew immediately she was perfect for this. Mr. Barnes, Catherine said, spreading documents across the metal table between us, your house on Desert Willow Drive. Tell me about the ownership structure. I bought it in 1997, I said, paid it off in 2011. When my wife died in 2020, I created a living trust for my grandson Sammy. He was only 6 at the time. The house went into the trust, with me as the trustee. So legally, you don't own the house. The trust does. Correct. Catherine made a note. And who's living there now? Brian Kelly, my son-in-law, his wife Kiara, my daughter, and Sammy. They moved in 5 years ago. Temporary, they said. Then I got arrested, and suddenly they're treating it like it's theirs. Catherine's pen moved across her notepad. Did you give them permission to stay there while you're incarcerated? No. There's no formal lease, no rental agreement. They're just there. Interesting, Catherine looked up. Under Arizona law, if the trustee is incapacitated or imprisoned, the trust enters a dormant state until the trustee can resume duties or a successor is appointed. But here's the part your son-in-law doesn't know. You can still act as trustee from prison through a designated representative. And if you're released, you can activate a clause requiring review of all occupancy arrangements. English, please, I said. You can kick them out. Legally, and they won't see it coming until it's too late. For the first time in 20 months, I felt something like hope. Not the warm kind, the cold, calculating kind that comes from seeing your enemy's weakness. How long will it take to set up? I asked. I'll need access to the original trust documents. File some paperwork, maybe 6 weeks. Your release date is March 12th, 2025. Correct. Then I'll make sure everything's ready. The eviction notice can be served 90 days after your release. June 10th, middle of summer when housing is expensive and scarce. I appreciated her attention to detail. Over the next 8 weeks, Catherine filed papers I barely understood. Amendments to the trust, designation of temporary successor trustee, notice of intention to review occupancy. All legal, all documented, all building toward the moment when Brian would realize he'd been living in a house that was never his and never would be. But that wasn't enough. I wanted more. In January 2025, I gave Bernard Fisher a new assignment. Find every dollar Brian Kelly earned that he didn't report to the IRS. Every cash payment, every side deal, every penny he hid. I want a complete picture. Bernard's response came 3 weeks later. The report was 47 pages long. Brian hadn't just stolen my money. He'd been running unreported income schemes for years. Cash payments from clients that never appeared on his 1099s. Consulting fees from shell companies. Under-the-table commissions from developers who wanted to avoid proper documentation. Bernard estimated at least $67,000 in unreported income just in 2024 alone. Add the $180,000 he stole from me, which he definitely didn't report as income because that would be admitting to theft, and you had $247,000 in taxable income the IRS knew nothing about. I'd spent 35 years helping people navigate tax law. I knew exactly what happened to people who hid that much money from the government. Penalties, interest, potential criminal charges. The IRS didn't play games. Bernard, I wrote back, document everything. I want dates, amounts, sources. Make it investigation ready. When I get out, we're handing this to the IRS. In February, Brian made his 20th visit request. 20 months of trying to see me. 20 months of me saying no. I wondered if Kiara knew how obsessed he'd become. I wondered if she questioned why her father refused to see his own family. Let her wonder. She'd chosen her side. The last report from Bernard before my release arrived on March 1st. He'd found the final piece. Sharon Whitmore had been having an affair with Brian. Not anymore. It ended badly in late 2024. But she'd kept records. Texts, emails, photos. The kind of documentation angry ex-lovers keep as insurance. Whitmore will cooperate if approached correctly, Bernard wrote. She's afraid of Kelly now, thinks he might blame her if anything goes wrong. Classic criminal psychology, thieves turning on each other. I filed that away too. Another weapon for the right moment. Officer Torres found me in the library on March 8th, 4 days before release. You've got that look, he said, like you're planning something. Just thinking about freedom, I said. Mr. Barnes, whatever you're planning, be careful. Kelly's not going to take this lying down. Neither am I said. That's the whole point. On my last night in Florence Correctional Facility, I lay in my bunk and reviewed everything. The timeline, the evidence, the legal structures Catherine had built, the IRS documentation Bernard had compiled. 23 months of patient, methodical preparation. Brian thought he'd won by framing me. He thought the old man would rot in prison while he lived the good life in my house, with my daughter, raising my grandson as his own. But Brian had made one critical error in his planning. He'd assumed I'd break. He'd assumed prison would destroy me, that I'd come out beaten and helpless. Instead, I'd spent 23 months becoming someone new, someone harder, someone who understood that nice guys finish last, and I was done being nice. I'd learned something important from chess. Sometimes you sacrifice a piece to gain position. Sometimes you lose your queen to set up checkmate. Brian had taken 2 years of my life. Now I was going to take everything from him, and it would all be completely legal. February 2025. 1 month until freedom. That's when Brian finally figured out something was wrong. Officer Torres handed me the notification with a grim expression. Someone's been asking questions about you on the outside. Private investigator named Danny Moss. Cheap license. Works out of a strip mall. He's been calling the facility, trying to confirm your correspondence logs. I'd been expecting this. Bernard had warned me that Brian might get nervous eventually. 22 months of declined visits would make anyone suspicious, especially someone with as much to lose as my son-in-law. Let him dig, I said. There's nothing he can find that will help him. But Torres looked concerned. Mr. Barnes, if Kelly knows you're working with lawyers, he might try something preemptive. I'm counting on it. 3 days later, Catherine Ramos called. Her voice on the prison phone was tight with controlled anger. Frank, your son-in-law just filed for adverse possession of your house. He's claiming 2 years of continuous occupation with maintenance and care of the property while you were incarcerated. He's arguing that the trust is invalid because you can't serve as trustee from prison. I smiled. The guard monitoring the call probably thought I was crazy. Catherine, that's exactly what we needed. He just put his intentions in writing, filed with the court. Public record, he's documented his greed for us. You knew he'd do this? I hoped he would. Brian's smart, but he panics under pressure. He's been feeling safe for too long. Those monthly visits he kept trying to make. He was checking on me, making sure I wasn't planning anything. Now he knows I am, so he's trying to grab the house before I get out. It's predictable. Catherine was quiet for a moment. I can block this filing. There's a technical error in his paperwork. He listed the property owner as you personally, not the Samuel Frank Kelly Trust. Basic mistake, but it invalidates the whole petition. Do it. Make him look incompetent. And Catherine, make sure the rejection gets filed publicly too. I want a paper trail of him trying to steal from his own son's trust fund. Understood. Frank, you've gotten cold. No, I said. I just stopped being warm. Bernard Fisher's final report before my release was comprehensive. He'd tracked Brian's movements for the past 3 weeks. The man was falling apart. Multiple meetings with his cheap private investigator. Long lunches with Sharon Whitmore where they argued loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Late-night drives past the Florence facility, like he was trying to work up courage to demand answers I wouldn't give. The gambling debts had returned too. Bernard found records of Brian visiting a casino in Tucson twice in January, losing money he didn't have. The pattern was reasserting itself. Stress made Brian gamble. Gambling made him desperate. Desperation made him stupid. Perfect. On March 1st, I received a letter from Kiara, my daughter. Her handwriting was shaky, uncertain. Dad, Brian says you've been plotting something. He says you hired lawyers to try to take the house. That's not true, is it? We've been taking care of everything while you were gone. We kept the property taxes paid, maintained the yard, everything. This is our home now. Sammy's home. Please don't do anything that would hurt your grandson. Kiara, I read it 3 times. Each time it hurt less. She'd chosen her side. She'd believed Brian's version of events, believed I was guilty, and now she was defending the house they'd stolen from me. My daughter thought I was the villain in this story. I wrote back, Kiara, you'll understand everything soon. The house belongs to Sammy. It always did. I made sure of that in 2019 when I created his trust. You and Brian have been living in your son's property, rent-free for 2 years. We'll discuss this when I'm released. Dad. Short. Factual. Cold. Officer Torres collected the letter and studied my face. You okay, Mr. Barnes? Better than okay, I said. Everything's falling into place. March 11th, the day before my release, Brian made his final visit attempt. Request number 23. I pictured him in the parking lot, signing in one last time, desperate for any indication of what I was thinking. I wrote declined with a flourish. That night, my last night in Florence Correctional Facility, I couldn't sleep, not from anxiety, from anticipation. I lay on my bunk reviewing the plan step by step. Catherine had filed all the necessary paperwork. The trust was reactivated, successor trustee appointed, eviction notice prepared for 90 days post-release. Bernard had compiled the financial evidence for the IRS. Michael Cordova had my appeal ready to file based on the new evidence of Brian's fraud. Every piece was positioned perfectly. I'd sacrificed 2 years of my life, my queen in chess terms. But now Brian's king was exposed, and I had 14 different ways to deliver checkmate. The next morning, March 12th, 2025, they processed me out at 6 a.m. I walked through those gates carrying one small box of belongings, legal documents mostly, and my notebooks with their carefully tracked timelines. The Arizona sunrise was just starting to paint the desert orange. The air smelled like creosote and freedom. Catherine Ramos was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against a silver sedan, professional as always, dressed in a gray suit that probably cost more than my entire prison wardrobe. "Good morning, Frank," she said. "Ready to go home?" "Not yet," I said. "First, I need to make a statement." We drove to a bank in Phoenix where Catherine had arranged for me to access my accounts, frozen during my incarceration but now reactivated. I had $83,000 saved. Not much for 2 years of legal work, but Bernard and Catherine had agreed to defer most of their fees until after my appeal succeeded. "We believe in you," Bernard had said during our last prison meeting, "and we believe in taking money from people like Brian Kelly." From the bank, we went to a law office on Central Avenue. Catherine's firm occupied the entire 15th floor. Glass walls, modern furniture, the kind of place that screams success. We sat in a conference room overlooking downtown Phoenix, and Catherine spread documents across the mahogany table. "Everything's ready," she said. "The moment we file the eviction notice, Brian and Kiara will receive official notification. 90 days from today, June 10th, a sheriff will remove them from the property if they haven't vacated voluntarily." "And the accumulated rent?" I asked. $52,800 based on comparable properties in North Phoenix. The trust has legal standing to pursue collection. We can attach any assets Brian has, which according to Bernard's research isn't much. I looked at the paperwork, months of preparation condensed into legal language that would destroy Brian's comfortable life. "One more thing," I said. "I want to be there when he gets the news. I want to see his face." Catherine smiled. "I thought you might. He's meeting you at the prison gates. Shall we surprise him?" They were waiting when we pulled into the Florence Correctional Facility parking lot. Brian's BMW, leased, Bernard's research had revealed, not owned, was parked near the exit gate. I could see them through the windshield. Brian in the driver's seat, Kiara beside him, Sammy in the back. My grandson, 8 years old now. I hadn't seen him since before my arrest. "You don't have to do this," Catherine said quietly. "We can serve the papers through normal channels." "No," I said. "I want him to know. I want him to understand that I knew all along." We got out of the car. Brian saw me immediately and climbed out, his face arranged in what he probably thought was a welcoming expression. Concerned, caring, the dutiful son-in-law picking up his father-in-law from prison. I'd spent 2 years imagining this moment. Reality was better. "Frank," Brian called out, walking toward me with his hand extended. "Welcome back. We're here to take you home." I stopped 3 feet away, didn't take his hand, just looked at him. He was aging poorly, new lines around his eyes, gray at his temples. The stress of wondering what I knew had taken its toll. "Home?" I said. My voice came out colder than I'd intended. "You mean my house on Desert Willow Drive? The one at 4127 that I purchased in 1997? Brian's smile flickered. "Well, yes. We've been maintaining it for you. Everything's exactly as you left it. Everything except my freedom, my reputation, and $320,000 of my client's money that you stole." The parking lot went silent. Kiara had gotten out of the car now, Sammy's hand in hers. Her face went pale. "Dad, what are you—" "Kiara, take Sammy back to the car," I said without looking at her. "This conversation is between me and Brian." Brian's fake smile was gone now. His jaw tightened. "Frank, I understand you're upset about what happened, but accusations like that—" "Accusations?" I pulled the envelope from my jacket, the one Catherine had prepared. "Let me tell you about accusations, Brian. February 14th, 2023. You deposited $180,000 in cash to pay off gambling debts. March 8th, 2023. I was arrested. Timeline matches perfectly. You had access to my office, my computer, my client files. You forged the documents, set up the fake account, transferred the money, and framed me." Brian's face was transforming, the confident mask cracking. His skin went from healthy tan to something closer to old newspaper. His hands, which had been gesturing casually, suddenly didn't seem to know where to go. "You can't prove—" "I have 2 years' worth of proof, bank records, surveillance footage, witness statements." I took a step closer. "And your accomplice, Sharon Whitmore? She's very interested in making a deal with prosecutors to avoid her own charges. Funny how criminals turn on each other." Brian's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. He looked like a fish that had just realized it was on a hook. It was magnificent. "But let's talk about the house," I continued. "That's why you're really here, isn't it? You thought you'd drive me back, get me comfortable, make sure I wasn't going to cause problems, keep me under control." "We're family," Brian managed. "We're not family. You're the man who destroyed my life to steal my property. Speaking of which," I gestured to Catherine, who stepped forward with her briefcase. "This is Catherine Ramos, specialist in trust and estate law. Catherine, would you explain to Brian about the house?" Catherine's smile was professional and merciless. "Mr. Kelly, in 2019, Mr. Barnes transferred the property at 4127 Desert Willow Drive into an irrevocable living trust for the benefit of his grandson, Samuel Frank Kelly. Mr. Barnes served as trustee. Upon his incarceration, the trust entered dormant status. Now that Mr. Barnes has been released, he has transferred trusteeship to a professional trustee who will execute the trust's purpose, preserving the asset for the beneficiary." She handed Brian a document. He took it with shaking hands. "That's an eviction notice," Catherine continued. "You have 90 days to vacate the property. June 10th, 2025. You'll also owe $52,800 in fair market rental value for your 2-year occupation. The trust will pursue all legal remedies to collect this debt." Brian stared at the paper. His hands were trembling so badly the document rustled like leaves in wind. His face had gone from newspaper gray something closer to white chalk. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool March morning. "You can't do this," he whispered. "We have rights. Adverse possession. I filed—" "Your filing was rejected yesterday," Catherine said. "Technical errors. It's public record. You attempted to claim ownership of property held in trust for your own son. That shows intent to defraud, which will be very interesting to prosecutors when they review Mr. Barnes's case." "This is insane!" Brian's voice cracked upward. "Frank, you're doing this because you're angry, but think about Kiara. Think about Sammy. You're going to make your own grandson homeless." "Sammy owns the house," I said quietly. "He'll get it when he turns 25. In the meantime, Kiara can rent an apartment like a normal adult. You, on the other hand. I paused. Let the moment breathe. You're going to lose everything. The house is just the beginning. Brian's eyes went wide, actual fear now replacing the arrogance. What did you do? I spent 2 years planning, I said. Every month you came to visit, trying to make sure I didn't suspect anything. Every month I declined, and you went home more nervous. You should have left me alone, Brian. You should have taken your stolen money and disappeared. Instead, you got greedy. You tried to take my house, too. You're bluffing, but his voice had no conviction. Am I? I tilted my head. I guess you'll find out soon enough. Enjoy the next 90 days in the house, Brian. Make some good memories. They'll have to last you. I turned to Catherine. Let's go. I need breakfast. Prison food was terrible, and I've been dreaming about real coffee for 2 years. As we walked to the car, I heard Kiara calling after me, Dad, please, we can talk about this. I didn't turn around, didn't respond. Just got in Catherine's sedan and let her drive me away from the prison, away from Brian's shocked white face, away from 2 years of concrete and steel. In the rearview mirror, I watched Brian standing in the parking lot, still holding the eviction notice, his mouth moving but no sound reaching me. Kiara had her hands on his shoulders, clearly asking what was wrong. Sammy stood beside them, confused and scared. It wasn't perfect. Hurting my daughter wasn't part of the plan I'd enjoyed, but she'd made her choice when she believed Brian over me. How do you feel? Catherine asked as we merged onto the highway toward Phoenix. Hungry, I said, and patient. This is move 1. I have 13 more planned. Catherine laughed. Frank Barnes, I think prison made you terrifying. No, I said, watching the desert roll past. It made me strategic. April rolled in with that dry Phoenix heat that makes everything feel like it's waiting for something to break. I'd been out of prison for 3 weeks, living in a modest apartment Catherine had helped me rent. Not the house. That would wait until June 10th, when the sheriff evicted Brian. For now, I had a 1-bedroom place with a view of the parking lot and enough space to rebuild my life. Or rather, to finish tearing down Brian's. Bernard Fisher called me on April 7th. Frank, it's done. I submitted the financial investigation report to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division this morning. Everything's documented. The $180,000 in unreported income from February 2023, the $67,000 in cash consulting fees from 2024, all of it. They confirmed receipt and opened a case file. I was drinking coffee on my small balcony, watching the sunrise. How long until they contact him? Criminal investigations usually take time, but this case is straightforward. I'd estimate 2 to 3 weeks before he gets the first notice. Frank, when they see he didn't report income that matches exactly with embezzled funds from your case, they're going to connect the dots fast. Good, I said. That's the point. The beauty of it was simple. I hadn't done anything illegal. Bernard had compiled publicly available financial records. I'd submitted a detailed citizen's report to the IRS, something any American can do if they suspect tax fraud. The fact that the suspect was my son-in-law who'd framed me for embezzlement, that was just context. Michael Cordova, my criminal defense attorney, had been watching Brian's attempts to fight the eviction. He's hired 3 different lawyers, Michael told me over lunch at a downtown diner. Every single one has told him the same thing. The trust is ironclad. One of them actually laughed when Brian suggested adverse possession after his filing was rejected. The legal community's starting to talk about him, and not favorably. His reputation's suffering, collapsing. Real estate agents live on referrals and trust. Word's gotten around that Brian Kelly tried to steal property from his own son's trust fund. His office has started distancing themselves from him. I took a bite of my sandwich. It tasted better than anything I'd eaten in 2 years. What about Sharon Whitmore? Still employed at the same agency, but she's been very quiet. No social media activity, no public appearances. If I were her, I'd be nervous. Sharon should have been nervous. Bernard's investigation had given the IRS everything they needed to see her role too. The $45,000 payment, the timeline, the shell company connection. She'd helped launder stolen money and taken her cut. The moment the IRS started digging into Brian, they'd find her. The question was, would she panic first? April 23rd, I got my answer. Catherine called at 9 in the morning. Frank, Sharon Whitmore just contacted the FBI. She's offering to cooperate in exchange for immunity. She's claiming Brian Kelly forged documents in your name, that she helped move money without knowing it was embezzled, and that she's willing to testify. I set down my coffee cup carefully. She's flipping on him. Completely. She's scared. The IRS contacted her last week about unreported income, and she realized she's facing potential jail time. She's trying to save herself by giving them Brian. Will they give her immunity? Probably. She's a minor player with evidence against the main perpetrator. The FBI and IRS both want Brian more than they want her. Frank, this means your appeal just got a lot stronger. If Sharon testifies that Brian framed you, that's direct evidence of your innocence. I stood up and walked to my apartment window. Down in the parking lot, normal people were going about their normal lives. None of them knew that somewhere across town, Brian Kelly's world was imploding. When does Brian find out? I asked. He probably already knows. The IRS serves notices by certified mail and through official contact. My guess? He got the letter yesterday, or today. I imagined Brian opening that letter, that thick official envelope from the Internal Revenue Service. The words, Criminal Investigation Division, at the top. The detailed accounting of $247,000 in unreported income. The calculation of penalties, interest, and back taxes totaling $340,000. The realization that this wasn't about the house anymore. This was about his freedom. Bernard called 2 hours later. Frank, Brian just tried to contact me. Left 3 voicemails. He's panicking. Wants to know if there's a way to work this out before things get worse. There isn't, I said. The IRS doesn't negotiate with tax cheats, especially not ones who committed fraud to hide embezzlement. Did you respond? No, I'm not his investigator. My work's done. I compiled evidence and submitted it to the appropriate authorities. What happens next is up to them. Perfect, I said. Let him panic. Let him try every door and find them all locked. That evening I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, Please, we need to talk. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. Frank, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please, can we meet? Just you and me. No lawyers, no games. I need to explain some things. There's more to this story than you know. Brian, I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Catherine and Michael with a note. Documentation of contact attempt. Maintain no communication policy. Michael responded within minutes. Good instinct. He's looking for any way to control the narrative, or get information about what you know. Don't engage. I wouldn't. Brian had spent 2 years in my house, playing the concerned son-in-law while I rotted in prison. He'd made his choices. Now he could live with the consequences. The April weather heated up. My apartment didn't have great air conditioning, but I didn't care. I spent my days walking through Phoenix, relearning the city I'd left behind. The coffee shops that had opened while I was gone. The restaurants that had closed. The way downtown had changed. I also spent time at the Phoenix Chess Society. My old membership was still active. They'd kept it going as a courtesy after my arrest. Some of the regular players recognized me. Most were polite, but distant. One older player, a retired lawyer named Arthur, sat down across from me one afternoon. Frank Barnes, he said. I followed your case. A lot of people thought you were guilty. A lot of people were wrong, I said, setting up the pieces. So I'm hearing. Arthur moved his pawn. Word is things are turning around for you. Your son-in-law's in some trouble now, isn't he? That's what I hear, I said, matching his opening. Tax problems. Criminal investigation. Very unfortunate. Arthur smiled slightly. You know what I appreciate about chess, Frank? It rewards patience. People who can see the whole board, not just the next move. That's why I like it too, I said. We played in comfortable silence. I won in 37 moves, a slow, methodical victory that crushed his position piece by piece until his king had nowhere left to go. Arthur shook my hand afterward. Welcome back, Frank. Phoenix needs more players like you. On April 30th, Bernard sent me a text. Whitmore met with FBI and IRS today. 3 hours. She gave them everything. Documents, emails, texts, recorded conversations. Brian's finished. I sat on my balcony that evening, watching the sun set over the city. Somewhere out there, Brian was probably doing the same thing, but his sunset looked very different than mine. He was watching everything he'd stolen burn away. The house he'd tried to take, gone in 40 days. The money he'd hidden from the IRS, now evidence against him. The wife who'd believed in him, about to learn the truth. Sharon Whitmore would testify. The evidence would prove Brian forged my signature, stole my client's money, and framed me for his crimes. My conviction would be overturned. His life would be destroyed. And I wouldn't have broken a single law to make it happen. That's the thing about revenge. When you do it right, you don't need violence or threats or illegal acts. You just need to be patient enough to let your enemy destroy themselves with the same tools they used against you. Brian had used the law to frame me. Now I was using the law to expose him. Justice isn't always pretty, but it's efficient. May brought two things: desert storms and family drama. The storms I could handle. The drama was more complicated. Kiara showed up at my apartment on May 3rd without warning. I opened the door to find my daughter standing there, her face red from crying, her hands trembling. "Dad," she said, "we need to talk, please." I almost closed the door, almost told her that she'd made her choice 2 years ago when she believed Brian over me. But she looked broken in a way that reminded me of how she'd looked after her mother died, lost and desperate for something solid to hold on to. "Come in," I said. She sat on my cheap couch in my barely furnished apartment and stared at her hands. "I talked to Sharon Whitmore yesterday. She called me. She told me everything." "Everything?" "About Brian, about the money, about the gambling debts and the fraud, and how he framed you." Kiara looked up and her eyes were hollow. "She said she helped him launder the money. She said he planned it for months. Dad, he used me. He used all of us." I sat in the chair across from her, didn't move closer. "Yes." "I believed him," Kiara said, her voice breaking. "When you were arrested, when he testified against you, when he said you'd been acting strange, I believed every word. I thought my father had turned into a criminal, and my husband was trying to protect us." "You chose your husband over your father," I said quietly. "That's not necessarily wrong, Kiara. You're supposed to be loyal to your spouse, but you should have asked more questions." I know. She was crying now, not bothering to wipe her tears. "He was so convincing. Every month when we went to visit you and you declined, he'd say you were ashamed, that you couldn't face us. He made it seem like you were the one pushing us away." "I was pushing you away," I said, "just not for the reasons he claimed. I was giving myself time to build a case against him." Kiara looked at me with something like fear. "Dad, what did you do? Brian's terrified. He got some letter from the IRS. He's been calling lawyers all week. The house eviction, the investigation. Is this all you?" "I reported his tax crimes to the appropriate authorities," I said. "I documented his fraud through legal investigation. I activated the trust I'd created for Sammy to protect my grandson's inheritance. Everything I've done has been legal, Kiara, unlike what Brian did to me. He's saying you're out for revenge, that you've turned cold. I'm out for justice," I corrected. "There's a difference. Brian framed me for a crime, stole from innocent people, and destroyed my reputation. I'm making sure he faces consequences. If that seems cold to you, consider that I spent 2 years in a cell thinking about it." Kiara was quiet for a long moment. "I'm filing for divorce?" "Good. I need to know something, Dad. The house, Sammy's house. Will he really get it?" "Yes. When he turns 25, the trust will transfer full ownership to him. Until then, it'll be managed professionally to maintain the property value. That house is worth $485,000. It's his future. And Brian and I will be evicted on June 10th if you haven't vacated by then. Kiara, you're my daughter. I'll help you find an apartment, help you get settled. But I won't let Brian stay in that house one day longer than the law allows." She nodded slowly. "I understand. I don't like it. But I understand." She stood up. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I know you can't forgive me right now." "I can't," I agreed. "Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But you're still my daughter, and Sammy's still my grandson. We'll figure out how to rebuild. After all this is finished, She left without another word. Bernard called an hour later. "Frank, Brian's making moves. He just hired a criminal defense attorney. Expensive one, too. Victor Delgado, former prosecutor. He's good." "How's Brian paying for an expensive attorney?" I asked. "Good question. My guess? He's leveraging everything he has left. Maybe borrowed from family. Or he's planning to declare bankruptcy and the lawyer knows he won't get paid. What can Delgado do for him? Honestly, not much. Sharon's testimony combined with the financial evidence is devastating. Best case scenario for Brian is a plea deal that reduces his sentence. But he's looking at prison time either way. 2 days later, Brian tried to call me. I'd changed my number, but he found it somehow. Probably through Kiara before she filed for divorce. The phone rang at 7 in the morning. I answered. "Frank, please listen." I hung up. He called back immediately. This time I let it go to voicemail. "Frank, I know you hate me. I know what I did was wrong. But please, there has to be a way to fix this. The house, fine, take it. The IRS thing, I'll work with them. But you don't have to destroy me completely. Think about Sammy. Think about what this will do to him. Please, call me back." I deleted the message and blocked the number. Brian's attorney, Victor Delgado, tried a more formal approach. He sent a letter to Catherine requesting a meeting to discuss resolution options for all parties. Catherine called me to ask how to respond. "Tell him no," I said. "There's nothing to discuss. The IRS investigation is out of my hands. The eviction is a matter of trust law. I have no interest in helping Brian avoid the consequences of his actions." "He's desperate," Catherine said. "Desperate people do unpredictable things." "He can't hurt me anymore," I said. "What's he going to do? Frame me for another crime while under federal investigation himself? He's cornered, Catherine. Let him panic." The real estate agency where Brian worked made their move on May 15th. They fired him. The official reason was violation of company ethics policies, but everyone knew why. Having an employee under criminal investigation for tax fraud and embezzlement was bad for business. Bernard confirmed it through his sources. Kelly cleaned out his desk yesterday afternoon. There was apparently a scene. He argued with his supervisor, claimed he was being unfairly targeted, threatened to sue for wrongful termination. Security escorted him out. Without his job, Brian had no income. Without income, he couldn't afford Victor Delgado or any other attorney. The expensive lawyer would drop him soon, leaving him with a public defender who'd be overwhelmed and ineffective. The same kind of public defender I'd had at my trial. The symmetry was almost poetic. Kiara called me on May 21st. "Dad, Brian came by my apartment last night, the one I'm renting while I wait for the house situation to resolve. He was drunk and angry. He blamed you for everything, the investigation, the eviction, me leaving him, losing his job, all of it. He said you'd planned this for 2 years, that you were obsessed with destroying him." "Is Sammy okay?" I asked. "He wasn't there. He was at my friend's house for a sleepover. Brian left before things got worse, but Dad, he's unraveling. I'm scared he might do something stupid. Did you call the police?" "No, I wanted to warn you." I thought about this. Brian, drunk and desperate, blaming me for his own crimes. It fit the pattern. He'd never taken responsibility for anything in his life. Why start now? "Kiara, if he contacts you again, call the police. Document everything. Get a restraining order if necessary. And don't tell him anything about me, where I live, my phone number, nothing." "Okay. Dad, be careful." "I've been careful for 2 years," I said. "I'm not stopping now." But that night, alone in my apartment, I thought about what Catherine had said. Desperate people do unpredictable things. Brian had everything to lose. His house, his job, his family, his freedom. Men in that position sometimes make violent choices. I called Bernard. "I need you to monitor Brian Kelly. His location, his activities, his contacts. Can you do that? Surveillance? Frank, that's expensive." "I have money. Do it. I need to know if he's planning something." Bernard was quiet for a moment. "You think he might try to hurt you?" "I think a man who'd frame his father-in-law for embezzlement might do anything when he's cornered," I said, "and I'd rather be paranoid and safe than trusting and dead." "Understood. I'll start tomorrow." I sat on my balcony until midnight, watching the city lights. Somewhere out there, Brian was probably doing the same thing, but his night was darker than mine. His future was measured in prison years and bankruptcy filings. Mine was measured in restored reputation and quiet revenge. But Kiara was right about one thing. This wasn't over yet. Brian still had 3 weeks until the eviction. 3 weeks to be desperate. 3 weeks to make a final, stupid mistake. I just needed to make sure that mistake didn't involve me ending up dead. June 10th, 2025. Eviction Day. I arrived at the house on Desert Willow Drive at exactly 10 in the morning. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Department cruiser was already there, parked in the driveway I'd paved 15 years ago. Deputy Martinez stood by the front door, official papers in hand, looking professionally bored. Catherine pulled up beside me in her sedan. "Ready for this?" she asked. "I've been ready for 2 years," I said. The house looked the same as when I'd left it. White stucco, red tile roof, desert landscaping that required minimal water. My house. The one I'd bought in 1997 for $160,000 and had paid off by 2011. The one worth $485,000 now. The one Brian Kelly thought he could steal. The front door opened. Brian stepped out. He looked terrible. Unshaven, clothes wrinkled, eyes bloodshot and wild. The confident real estate agent who testified against me in court was gone. This was a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. "You can't do this!" he shouted before I'd even gotten out of the car. "This is my home. Sammy's home. You're making your own grandson homeless, you selfish." "Mr. Kelly," Deputy Martinez interrupted, "I need you to step back and let me explain the legal—" "I don't care about legal." Brian's voice cracked upward. "This whole thing is Frank's revenge. He's been planning this since prison. He's obsessed." I walked toward the house slowly, deliberately. Catherine stayed a few steps behind me, briefcase in hand. Brian saw me approaching and his face transformed, rage mixing with something that looked like genuine fear. "Frank, please," his tone changed, became pleading. "Please, we can work something out. I'll move out. Fine. But don't do the IRS thing. Don't testify against me. You'll destroy me completely." "I'm not testifying against you," I said calmly. "Sharon Whitmore is. I'm just a concerned citizen who reported tax fraud to the appropriate authorities." Brian's hands were shaking. Not from cold, it was already 85 degrees, but from stress, fear, maybe withdrawal. "You planned this, every piece of it. The trust, the investigation, all of it. You spent 2 years planning how to destroy me." "Yes," I said simply. "I did. That's not justice, that's revenge. Brian, you framed me for embezzlement. You stole $320,000 from innocent people and made sure I went to prison for it. You testified against me in court, lived in my house, tried to steal my property through legal manipulation, and used my grandson as a shield. Now you're facing consequences. That's not revenge. That's accountability." Deputy Martinez cleared his throat. "Mr. Kelly, I have an eviction order signed by Judge Morrison. You need to vacate the premises immediately. You can take personal belongings, but the property reverts to the trust as of today." Brian looked at the deputy, then at me, then at Catherine. His eyes were desperate, searching for any angle, any escape. There wasn't one. I'd made sure of that. "I have nowhere to go," Brian said. His voice broke. "No job, no money, no—" "You had 2 years to prepare for this," I said. "I told you at the prison gates that eviction was coming. You chose to spend that time fighting instead of planning." "Because this is wrong." Brian's voice rose again. "I made mistakes, okay? I know that. But you're taking everything. The house, my freedom, my family, everything." "You took everything from me first," I said quietly. "My freedom, my reputation, my practice, 2 years of my life. The difference is you did it with lies and fraud. I'm doing it with truth and law." Brian stared at me for a long moment. Then something in him broke. His shoulders sagged. His face crumpled. He dropped to his knees right there on the concrete driveway. My driveway. "Please," he whispered. "Please, Frank, I'm begging you. Don't do this. I'll do anything. I'll confess to everything. I'll make it right. Just please, don't take it all away." I looked down at him. This man who'd been so confident in court, so smooth in his lies, so certain he'd gotten away with it, now kneeling on concrete, begging. I felt no pity, no satisfaction either, really. just cold certainty that this was justice. Brian, I spent 2 years in a cell thinking about this moment, I said. Every month you came to visit, trying to make sure I didn't suspect you. Every month I declined, and you went home wondering if I knew. You used my grandson as a hostage, living in his trust property while framing his grandfather for crimes you committed. Now Sammy will get this house when he turns 25, just like I planned. The trust guarantees it. And me? Brian's voice was barely audible. What about me? You, I paused. You have exactly what you deserve. Nothing. Deputy Martinez stepped forward. Mr. Kelly, you need to stand up and start gathering your belongings. You have 2 hours to remove personal items. After that, the locks will be changed. Brian stood slowly, his legs shaking. He looked at me one more time, and I saw it, the moment he truly understood that he'd lost. That all his scheming, all his manipulation, all his confident plans had led him here, evicted from the house he'd tried to steal, facing prison for tax fraud, abandoned by his wife, unemployed and bankrupt. I hate you, he said softly. I know, I replied, but I stopped caring what you think about 23 months ago. He went inside. Through the open door, I could see him moving around, grabbing clothes, personal items. Deputy Martinez followed to supervise. Catherine stood beside me on the driveway. How does it feel? She asked quietly. Efficient, I said, like closing a well-organized case file. 40 minutes later, Brian emerged with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box. That was all he was taking from the house he'd lived in for 5 years. Deputy Martinez escorted him to a beat-up Honda Civic parked on the street. A friend's car probably, since Brian's BMW had been repossessed 2 weeks ago. Brian loaded his belongings into the trunk. He didn't look at me again, just got in the passenger seat and drove away. I watched the car disappear around the corner. Then I turned to Catherine. Let's change the locks. I want to inspect the property. Inside, the house was both familiar and foreign. Same layout, same bones, but Brian and Kiara had changed things. New furniture, different paint colors, photos of Sammy on the walls, my grandson growing up in my house while I sat in prison. But it was still my house, still the place I'd built a life with my wife, still the home that would belong to Sammy when he was old enough. I walked through the rooms slowly, cataloging what needed to be fixed, what needed to be replaced. Catherine followed, taking notes for the trust's property manager. In the master bedroom, I found something that made me stop, a chessboard on the dresser, old wooden hand-carved pieces. Mine, the one I'd left behind when I was arrested. Brian had kept it, maybe played on it, maybe thought it was his now. I picked up the white king and held it for a moment. Then I set it back in its starting position. Checkmate, I said quietly. August 2025. The Phoenix summer hit its peak, 115-degree days that made the desert shimmer like liquid glass. Brian Kelly's plea hearing was scheduled for August 14th. I attended. Not because I had to, because I wanted to see it finished. The federal courtroom was cold with aggressive air conditioning. Brian sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, looking 20 years older than when I'd last seen him. His public defender, the expensive Victor Delgado, had dropped him within 2 weeks, shuffled papers nervously. Sharon Whitmore testified first. She'd taken her immunity deal and ran with it, providing emails, text messages, recorded conversations. She explained how Brian had approached her with a plan to borrow money from his father-in-law's clients, how she'd helped set up the shell company, how they'd split the money and covered their tracks. I didn't know he was going to frame Mr. Barnes specifically, she said, not meeting anyone's eyes. I thought he'd just take the money. But then the FBI arrested Frank and Brian testified against him, and I realized what he'd done. I was scared to say anything. Scared enough to take $45,000 and keep quiet for 2 years. But the jury didn't need to hear my opinion on that. The prosecutor laid out the charges. Tax evasion totaling $247,000 in unreported income. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Identity theft for forging my signatures. Wire fraud for the electronic transfers. Obstruction of justice for his false testimony at my trial. Brian's lawyer tried to argue for leniency. Your Honor, my client has lost everything. His job, his marriage, his home, his reputation. He's already suffering consequences. Prison time seems excessive when... Judge Reeves, the The same judge who'd overseen my appeal cut him off. "Counselor, your client didn't just commit tax fraud. He framed an innocent man and let him spend 2 years in federal prison. That's not just financial crime. That's a moral atrocity. The sentence reflects both." Brian was asked if he wanted to make a statement. He stood slowly. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice flat and dead. "I made terrible choices. I hurt people I should have protected. I deserve punishment. I just want to say—" He glanced at where I sat in the gallery. "Frank, I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't respond, didn't move, just watched. Judge Reeves sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison, $340,000 in fines and restitution, and 5 years supervised probation after release. Brian's face went completely blank. He didn't cry or rage or beg, just stood there empty as the bailiff led him away. Outside the courthouse, Catherine met me on the steps. "Your exoneration hearing is scheduled for next week. Judge Morrison will formally vacate your conviction and order state compensation." "How much?" "Arizona law provides $70,000 per year of wrongful incarceration. You served 2 years. That's $140,000. The irony wasn't lost on me. Brian owed $340,000. I'd receive $140,000. The universe wasn't fair, but sometimes it was mathematically interesting. My exoneration hearing took 15 minutes. Judge Morrison reviewed the evidence: Sharon's testimony, Bernard's financial investigation, the proof that Brian had forged documents and perjured himself. She formally vacated my conviction, ordered the state to pay compensation, and apologized on behalf of the court system. "Mr. Barnes, what was done to you was a grave injustice," she said. "I hope this provides some measure of closure." Closure came later, in smaller moments. Kiara visited my apartment in late August. We met at a coffee shop instead, neutral ground. She looked healthier than the last time I'd seen her, clear-eyed, calmer. "I'm in therapy," she said without preamble. "Dealing with the Brian stuff, the betrayal, the lies, how I ignored warning signs. My therapist says I have trust issues now." She laughed weakly. "Which is fair?" "How's Sammy?" I asked. Confused. He doesn't really understand why Dad went away or why we moved out of Grandpa's house. I'm trying to explain it in ways an 8-year-old can process. She paused. "Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I chose wrong. But I want you to know I'm working on being better. For Sammy. For myself." "I know you are," I said. "And Kiara, we'll get there. It'll take time, but we'll get there. You're still my daughter." She cried then. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears of relief. We didn't hug or have some movie moment. Just sat there drinking coffee while she processed. But it was a start. September brought cooler weather and new routines. I moved back into the house on Desert Willow Drive. The trust paid me a modest property management fee to maintain it until Sammy turned 25. I spent weeks fixing things Brian had neglected, repainting rooms, restoring what he'd damaged. In the living room, I set up my old workbench for clock restoration, the hobby I'd abandoned during the stress of running my practice. I bought broken vintage clocks from estate sales and spent quiet evenings bringing them back to life. There was something satisfying about taking broken things and making them work again. Sammy visited on Saturdays. Kiara would drop him off in the morning and we'd spend the day together. I taught him chess using my old hand-carved set. He was sharp, asked good questions, thought 3 moves ahead even at 8 years old. "Grandpa, why does the knight move weird?" he asked during our 3rd lesson. "Because sometimes the best path isn't straight," I said. "Sometimes you have to think differently to win." He considered this, then moved his knight into position to fork my king and rook. "Like that?" I smiled. "Exactly like that." I didn't restart Barnes Tax Consulting. That life was finished. Instead, I became a consultant for the Arizona Attorney General's office, specializing in financial fraud investigations, helping prosecutors understand complex tax schemes, money laundering operations, embezzlement patterns. Turned out, 2 years studying law in prison had made me valuable. I knew how criminals thought now. I knew their patterns, their mistakes, their weaknesses, and I was very good at helping authorities catch them. On a Saturday evening in mid-September, I sat on my back patio, watching the sunset paint the desert orange and purple. Sammy had just left after beating me in chess for the first time. A clean victory I hadn't let him have. He'd earned it. My phone buzzed. A text from Officer Torres, the guard from Florence who'd helped me start this whole thing. Saw Kelly's sentencing in the news. Congratulations, Mr. Barnes. Justice served. I texted back, thanks. Visit Phoenix sometime. I'll buy you lunch. I set the phone down and thought about the past 2 years. The planning, the patience, the methodical destruction of Brian Kelly's life. Some people might call it revenge. A therapist would probably say I was obsessed. But I knew what it really was. Consequences. Brian had chosen to frame an innocent man. I'd chosen to make sure he paid for that choice. Everything I'd done was legal, documented, and justified. Justice, like chess, requires patience, strategy, and the ability to see several moves ahead. I'd played this game for 2 years, and I'd delivered checkmate. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.